Hello and welcome to the Leyton 2021 Trends R&D Tax Credit Opportunity for Dental Practices and Dental Labs. Thanks for taking the time. Please meet our presenters.
Hi, thank you for joining us today to talk about the R&D tax credit and how it can apply to the dental industry. My name is Adrian Keller. I am a general dentist. I've been in clinical practice for the past 15 years. The last 10 years, I've been practicing at MIT, servicing the faculty, the students, and the staff of the university. I joined Leyton in the early summer of 2020 as an R&D tax credit consultant for the dental industry. I'm joined today for this webinar by my colleagues, Marianne Martin and Timothy Hansen. Marianne.
Thanks, Adrian. Hi. Thank you for being with us today. We're so happy to have you here to discuss the R&D tax credit. My name is Marianne Martin. I am a clinical dental hygienist. I've been practicing for multiple decades. In clinical, I've also had the opportunity to do administrative work. I have presented lectures at Yankee Dental Congress, and I have also earned my bachelor's degree in Business and Human Services Administration. I joined Leyton in June of last year as an R&D tax credit technical consultant, and now I'm going to hand it over to Tim.
Thank you, Marianne. Hello, my name is Tim Hansen. I am a senior R&D tax credit consultant for Leyton in the US, and I lead the dental group for the West Coast. Thank you for making the time, and we look forward to sharing you some important information that has been viable for dental practices and dental labs to learn about it and also help their businesses be more efficient with some of the tax incentives that are out there. So let's get started. What will be covered today? Really a lot of fundamentals, introduction to the R&D tax credit, areas of R&D and dentistry that we've found. We'll use great examples of qualifying activity, talk about what can be claimed in terms of related activities and costs associated with the R&D tax credit, give you a sense of how the Leyton process is streamlined, and also share with you trends we see coming in the next year that'll be important to pay attention to in the dental industry. And of course, we'll be available with our contact information at the end for any follow-up questions. So the R&D tax credit, incentivizing innovation, it is a federal credit, and it has been on the books for more than 30 years. There have been some changes to it in the last 5 years as well. But essentially, it is a research and development tax credit that supports businesses who are engaged in innovation to help their businesses and ostensibly help the industry. What can it do for the business? A couple things. Number one, immediately it could reduce income or payroll taxes. The credits are banked for future tax liability, increases businesses' valuations, also frees up cash for the business. And what Leyton has done and perfected over the last 20 years consulting is just that. We work globally as innovation funding specialists. Here in the US, we focus specifically on the niche tax credit of the R&D space across the global spectrum. We advise in 12 countries, 24,000 clients, and in whatever country we are in, we do specialize in the same area of finding ways to help businesses get the benefit from their investment and their expenditures to help their businesses grow along the lines of innovation. How to benefit? It's really a key question here. And there are really two ways to keep in mind that you can benefit from the wages and the materials you're spending towards your innovation, creating a new product or process. And there's initially income tax potential credit, wherein a business has an income tax liability year over year. In some cases, going back several years, we are able to help businesses maximize what they've been spending in order to recoup some of those costs via the tax credit for income tax liability. And if the business is just starting, a practice is just getting going, or a lab, there is a payroll tax credit for businesses that are under a certain threshold of gross receipts, as well as not profitable. So there's a number of ways to benefit for early stage companies, dental practices and labs, as well as established practices. So the qualifying work I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Adrian, to talk about more about the four-part test.
Thanks. So now we're going to jump into the technical portion of this R&D benefit. So when we look at a dental practice or a dental lab to see if the R&D benefit can apply, there are 4 criteria which we look at, which have been set forth by the federal government. The first criteria we're looking for is a new or improved business component. So a new or improved product, a new or improved process, a new or improved technique. It can also be a new or improved software, invention, or formula. However, in the dental industry, we typically see product, process, or technique improvements. The second criteria is that there is a question of uncertainty to the capability, the method, or the design of this business component. So basically at the onset, you're not sure how this component is going to turn out. And remember, outcomes don't always need to be successes. And then the third criteria is that a process of experimentation has been established. So in order to eliminate or answer the uncertainty, some form of metric of evaluation has been set forth. It can be trial and error, it can be comparing one thing to an alternative. However, an important point to note is if you're simply evaluating commercially available products and comparing one to the other to determine which one may result in a better final outcome, that does not qualify under this process of experimentation, and so it would not be a qualifying project. And finally, the fourth criteria is that the component has to be technological in nature. The majority of things that we do in dentistry are technological in nature, and the business component does have to be rooted in the hard sciences, meaning it has to rely on the principles of physics, biology, chemistry, engineering, computer sciences. It can't be a marketing, sales, financial, or even a patient educational tool. So the majority of projects are going to fall into the clinical area of your practice or your lab. So that's a good place to focus. So really quick recap, there has to be something that's new or improved within your practice or your lab that has uncertainty about its capability, its method, or its design right from the start. You have a metric of evaluating it, and it's rooted in the hard sciences. Yeah, so once we've established that you have a qualified project, there are cost categories that apply for this benefit. We typically look at 3 categories, which are wages, so W-2 employees, 1099 contractors, and supplies. For all W-2 employees, it's their time directly spent on the R&D project that we can qualify. So we have direct performers, which will typically be the dentists working on the R&D project, and direct supporters of the R&D project, which will typically be the dental assistant. Contractors or 1099 employees qualify the same way. And then under the supply category, those supplies and materials directly used for the R&D projects can be claimed. However, depreciable assets cannot be claimed. So an example would be if you purchased a rotary or reciprocating handpiece for endo and you're developing a new file sequencing technique using this file system. You can't claim the handpiece because it's a depreciable asset, but you can claim the files because they are depletable. Okay, so now that hopefully you're getting to understand some of the criteria needed to claim a project and the associated cost categories that apply for the benefit, let's get into more detail on the potential areas of R&D seen in dentistry.
Okay, so we've discussed how the R&D tax credit is an activities-based credit. And across the board in the dental industry, whether a specialty or general practice or in a dental laboratory setting, dentistry is an innovative field. And as such, the most progressive innovations within the field come from the dentists and the dental lab technicians themselves. So we have clients who hold trademarks and patents for new dental products, processes, and techniques, and those certainly do qualify. But there are also process and technique improvements that are unique to or new to your practice or lab that could certainly qualify. So let's walk through an example and dissect a qualifying project. We have an oral surgery practice that we will assess a project that the oral surgeon conducted. So there was a question or hypothesis. Would applying PRF to the implant body prior to placement improve osseointegration? Would it aid in wound healing and provide efficiencies to the implant integration process? So the project is an improved process for dental implants in order to find an improved process for osseointegration and wound healing. This is our new or improved business component. So the oral surgery office conducted a clinical split mouth trial, which included 20 patients. 50% of the patients had implants placed with PRF on the implant body. 50% of the implants were placed without. So let's start with the uncertainties. Recall that this is a component of the 4-part test and that the activity must be intended to discover information in order to eliminate uncertainty as to the capability, the methodology, or the design. And although this may not be new to the industry, it is new to the dental practice, and there were uncertainties. Will this improve outcomes in wound healing and implant integration? So there were uncertainties as to the capability of the addition of PRF to improve osseointegration and provide adequate wound healing, and uncertainty as to the optimal methodology for integrating PRF onto the implant body in order to improve osseointegration. So in order to address these uncertainties, the practice engaged in a systematic evaluative process with noted metrics to investigate if it is fulfilling its purpose. The oral surgeon took radiographic and CBCT imaging studies prior to placement, at the 1-week follow-up, at 6 weeks, and also at 3 months. At the follow-up evaluations, data was collected. This included patient pain evaluation using the VAS scale of 1 to 10. The patients were asked and it was noted at follow-up evaluations. Torque testing and imaging studies were metrics used to evaluate progression of bone levels and osseointegration. And there was a clinical assessment of soft tissue healing. So based on the process of experimentation, application of the PRF improved outcomes in 95% of the surgical sites. So it was concluded that the process improved wound healing, surgical healing time, and that the bone quality with implants placed with PRF saturation was comparable at 3 months post-surgical to the healing at 6 months with implants placed without the PRF. So the duration of the project, how long does this qualify? So from the moment that the uncertainty starts is the start of the project. And at the moment that the uncertainty ends is when the project ends.
Okay, so Marianne just reviewed an example we saw in an oral surgeon's office. In ortho, we see improved techniques for tooth movement through the development of new wiring sequencing. In perio, we see product improvements through the development of a new tray design for microbial delivery in disease sites. In general dentistry, we're seeing restorative process improvements when designing and utilizing digital workflows combined with material selection. So there's a lot going on, as Marianne earlier said, kind of across the scope of dentistry. So now let's walk through some qualifiers for dental labs.
So within dental labs, projects will often involve improving a process, a technique, or the use of new materials. And with the technology labs, some things to ask are, has this improved the results? How are we trying to improve? What was working? Now recall what Adrian said previously, both success and failures reinforce research and development. So in dental labs, there's typically a document of protocols. And this is the standard operating procedure. One thing to ask, how did we get there? So there are logbooks and there are standard audit checklists. Walking backwards from this point will often help you reach the R&D. So there's an example. There's a new multi-layer puck. this particular lab has been using a monolithic. So the project, an improved crown material with improved flex strength and shading. This is the business component, with the goal that they had in mind to minimize remakes and improve offerings with properties of increased flexural strength. So what are some of the uncertainties? Again, uncertainties as to the capability, methodology, design. There was an uncertainty as to the design of the puck and the ideal positioning and milling, uncertainty as to the time and temp during processing to result in an optimal final product, and uncertainty as to the capability of the material to sustain forces. So in order to address these uncertainties, the dental lab techs engaged in a systematic evaluative process, noting test batches and recording parameters in the logbook. So what specific changes were made from, say, test batch 1 to test batch 2? How did they get improved outcomes with parameters that needed to be changed to overcome challenges of test batch 1? Things to consider: times, temperature, rate of climb, ramp rate, hold times, calibration of milling, sintering equipment, cleaning and burr changes of the mill. So as they went through the test batches, what challenges or what changes are you making as you are seeking improvement with each subsequent batch? So once the standard operating procedure is fully developed, the project is complete. The uncertainties have been evaluated and the R&D has ended. And this will also be in the document of protocols. So now that we understand what qualifies and how it qualifies, together let's go through the steps your team at Leyton, together let's go through the steps your team at Leyton will support you on.
Yeah, so during the next few minutes, I'm going to run you through the Leyton process in order to claim the R&D benefit. So after having a phone conversation with the business development team, there are 4 stages in our process. First is the initial assessment, where you'll be introduced to your consultant team, which will consist of a financial consultant and a technical consultant. We'll have a conversation reviewing the timeline of this claim, the criteria that apply for a qualifying project, and seeing where in your practice or your lab R&D is occurring. We'll run you through the exercise we just did with Marianne, where we take one of your potential projects and dissect it to see how R&D can apply. Then we'll discuss other potential projects and help guide you in filling out a list of projects document that organize your qualified projects. During this initial assessment, our financial team will review the qualified cost categories, explain which tax years will be in focus, and how you'll see your benefit. Also during this call, we'll answer any questions or concerns that you or your accountant may have. So definitely invite your accountant on this call if you would like. After this initial call, and it typically runs about 45 minutes, we'll email you a recap of the conversation and provide you with this list of projects document, which we will fill out with your qualified projects. Once we've received the list of projects document back, we'll schedule a scoping call, which is an in-depth evaluation of each project, making sure they meet the 4 criteria. Again, this conversation is roughly 45 minutes of your time. Once we've established all the projects, our financial consultant will work with you to allocate percentages of your employee or contractor's time and the supply costs that have been used during each project. From there, we're ready to write your technical report and provide you with all financial information that you'll submit to your CPA for them to deliver for your credit. So I know we ran through a lot, but Marianne's gonna talk a little bit about some of the trends that we are seeing with R&D in dentistry.
So as we had mentioned before, dentistry is an industry of innovation. We've seen lots of changes throughout the years and it's going to continue. And here are some of the trends we recognize going into 2021. Digital workflows and practices and dental labs, 3D printing and in-house milling in dental practices, AI and robotics in dentistry, and sleep dentistry. So I want to thank you all for being with us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim Hansen.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate your time today, and thank you everyone for listening. Again, you may have questions now about, looking at your practice or your lab and seeing what the credit might look like for you or how it would apply, or just have a general discussion. Our contact information is listed here, and we look forward to talking with you and hope we can help your business. Wishing you a lot of success in 21. Thanks again.